Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by Audible.com. You go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. You go there, you sign up for free, and get yourself a free audiobook and help support the show. I also want to introduce our new partner, is truthfunders.com. I was introduced to these guys by Jimmy Church from Fade to Black, okay, and truthfunders.com, they're just about to launch. It's a crowdfunding a website like a Kickstarter or GoFundMe, but they're only funding truthers and people in alternative media and that kind of stuff. And what we want to fund with our Truth Funders, we're going to be putting together is we want to do documentaries on topics like the West Memphis 3 and Columbine will probably maybe be one. You know, maybe we'll do something with our guest tonight. And Son of Sam and the David Berkowitz and the Process Church and the John Lennon assassination, all these topics that I've been working on. We want to start doing video documentaries on these topics. And we're going to try and be getting the funding through truthfunders.com. So to show our support for Truth Funders, why don't you go to their Facebook page tonight, go to Truth Funders on Facebook and give them a little like there to show them how we're getting the ball rolling for them. Tonight we are live on CJMarsRadio.com, 365 Live, HazyRadio.com, and simulcasting on PSN Radio, Wolf Spirit Radio, Awake Radio US, Awake Radio UK, 1800 Online, and Shizaz Radio. Then you can find us during the week on ParaX Radio, Saturday night, 7 p.m., Penny Entertainment, Sunday mornings, 10 a.m., and then Wednesday night we're on Firehorse with good old Chip Tatum, and on Shake and Wake on Thursday with Rick and Annie. I want to give a shout-out and dedicate this show to Morgan, who is the daughter of Amanda, our sponsor from Pacific West Bamboo. Morgan just had a birthday this week. She turned 7 years old. Happy birthday, Morgan. We love your mom. We love your brother, Makai. We gave him a little shout-out, so we're giving you one, too, for your birthday, too, as well. I hope you had a really happy birthday this week. We got some kind of sad news. Good old Reverend Pinckney, not so great. Reverend Pinckney went for sentencing on Monday. They gave him 2 to 10 years on such ridiculous charges you would not believe it. But he's still in good spirits. We hear they took him into custody. He's in jail right now, getting ready to go off to prison. But he's in good spirits, and we're going to be arranging something where we're talking to the warden at the jail where they're holding him, that we can interview him from jail and try and help him out there. When a lot of people are still behind Reverend Pinckney, and we're not giving up. We're trying to get him out of there. Now, tonight we have William Zabel, and it's about the Columbine conspiracy, the Columbine massacre, the shooting at the school over there in Littleton, Colorado, back in 1999. By the end of the show, I believe that you'll be convinced, at the very least, that there were more than 2 shooters. Okay, and so we'll get right down to our guest here. William, I really apologize. We had some technical problems tonight, but I think we're on the road to getting our show out there, my friend. So why don't you tell the audience about yourself, and then we'll get into the whole Columbine story.
Okay, well, to start off, I'm not just the average, conspiracy-type researcher. I've been a personal witness and a victim of, conspiracy. So I know they're real, even though the government denies them. Anybody who's been a personal victim of any type of crime or situation can tell you, how deep it goes. But to start off, like I said, when we were having the other technical difficulties, when I was a child, I saw a little bit of police corruption, a little bit of brutality in the town I lived in. We had a couple of cops that were drug dealers. My grandmother and her friends worked hard to put these cops away. They threatened family members. They would drive by the house, with the spotlights on. It was small stuff. It wasn't that big until I got into high school, and then I had what could have been another Columbine. It could have been a Columbine before Columbine. We had a local gang of kids who called themselves the Untouchables, a ridiculous name. And they picked a fight with the Bloods and Crips from Denver and wanted them to come out here to Brighton and start some stuff. Now, why I compare this to Columbine is very simple. Everybody in our school district knew the Bloods and Crips were coming out here with guns. They knew that there was going to be a gunfight. The Untouchables had guns themselves, but nobody did anything. School district didn't call the cops. Nobody called the cops until it was about ready to go down. And like I said before, I lived right across the street from the high school. I was home at lunch. I was going to stay home. There was no way I was going to get know that. And these kids I know come over and knocked on the door and said, "You got to let us use the phone. We got to call 911. A couple of the kids are here with guns." Well, this was pre-cell phone days. So I said, yeah. And the cops showed up and were waiting. There was one parked on my driveway. There was a couple parked down the street. And here comes the Bloods and the Crips and their lowriders, and the cops just rushed in, arrested everybody, business taken care of. That was a situation where it could have become a Columbine, because these kids that I knew, these untouchables, they were crazy. So that's why I compare it to Columbine. And then we moved forward to after I was out of high school. I went with my cousin to Panama, and he was a UPI reporter. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to take pictures and see what's going on, visit a foreign country. And I had no idea how bad it was going to be that December, but we saw some horrendous things, and not all of it was done by Panamanian police. The U.S. military killed quite a number of people, and later that night, a source took us out to the woods, the jungle down there, where we saw the mass graves. I had never seen anything like that in my life, and I don't ever want to see it again. And some of the material that we got, video and photos, ended up in the Panama Deception. Those people bought the material from us and other people that were down there that were reporters. And then what's even worse is that the situation that I was involved in California, married for 2 years, and to see the conspiracy from the media side of things, and how a large group, both religious and film groups, like the studios, can put the squeeze on an individual and say, "You're not wanted, you're going away." And I got squeezed there. My ex-wife was a Scientologist, and they didn't want me around because I asked too many questions. I didn't like what was going on. I came home from work one day from my mother-in-law's company. All my bags were packed. Lawyer for the family was there. Get out, go home, don't ever come back. And you got to sign a disclosure. Keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything that's gone on in this house or the business or anything else. And I knew I was outnumbered, so I left. Come back to Colorado. I go to college. Went first to get an associate's degree in graphic design. Then I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Colorado, Denver in Fine Arts. Then I decided to get into film in late 97, early 98, and I went to the Red Rocks Community College. Then I went to the CU's upper class for that, and that was in 99, and that is when the Columbine shooting happened, was April 1999. I got a call from a friend of mine who I didn't even know she lived down there. I know she lived in Littleton, but I didn't even know her daughter went to school there. And she goes, "Did you hear about the Columbine shooting?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, I'm going to put my daughter on the phone. You got to hear this story." And she was telling me about this, how her friends who were still going to school there were telling her about 2, 3, 5 shooters. In one case, one of her friends told her they saw as many as 10 people shooting. And I was like, I got to come down here and hear this in person. This is wild. Even for me, being a conspiracy type, that was still wild talk for me to hear. So I got her address from her because I'd never been to her house, and I went down there, and some of the kids from the school were in her living room and a couple of parents. And I began hearing these stories, and I'm putting it together. And, of course, the media was originally talking earlier in the day about 3, possibly more shooters, and then all of a sudden they dropped that and went down to 1 or 2. And I'm listening to
You know what, though? It's always that way, though. It's always that way in every single shooting. It starts out with, "We're looking for another guy," and then it was only the guys we caught.
Yeah.
At least the only guys that did it. But right.
Yeah, well, and I understand it coming from a military and law enforcement family that you never deduce that you've caught the guy until you know for sure. So I understood that point. But the fact is as you get into the shooting investigation later, you can clearly tell how they're covering up. And I saw the cover up within days. But that night, I could tell that some of the parents that were there really didn't want their kids talking too much. But one girl did tell me that, quote, "The shooters had face masks on, and she couldn't see through the face mask to identify their face." And I said, "Well, did you think they were Harrison Kleibold?" And she goes, "No, they were just too well built." And she goes, "And they had these these like uniforms or these, this thing on. And one of the fathers piped in, and he had been in the military, and he says, you mean like a military BDU? He says, where you're, it's all one-piece suit. And she goes, yeah, like that. And then she talked about how they had, the armor vest over that. And I said, well, did it say police? Was there anything on it? And she goes, no, there was no identifying features. But she said they definitely had like a tinted face mask so you could not see their face through it. Well, we went through a bunch of that night, and I heard some students talking, and I got in on their conversation. And one kid said he went out the east doors, and somebody was shooting from the park across the street, which is southeast of the school. Another girl said her and a couple of girls were in the gym and went to go out the gym doors, which is the northwest side of the school, and there were, quote, men dressed in black there with guns, so they turned around and ran back inside. And that night, and going forward, I began to hear these details. Men. They weren't talking about teenage boys. They were saying men. And this was a constant reference that night and in the days and weeks afterwards. Men with face masks, men dressed like cops, men in BDUs, with military style hardware, which that kind of didn't impress me too much because cops, a lot of departments have M16s and AR-15s. So I thought, well, that could still be like SWAT responding. But then when I heard the time they left the classroom, when they first heard the shots, to the time they encountered these so-called men in BDUs was like seconds to a minute. Not enough time for SWAT to respond. In fact, when I talked to some of the Denver PD SWAT officers who were actually closer to the school than Jeffco up in Golden, it still took them 20 minutes to get to the school. So that's when I began to realize that not everything was being told the way it should be. Obviously, the cover-up was already in place. Now, that night, Jefferson County was already having a fit because former Sheriff John Stone, who was the sheriff of the county at that time, he was already telling people that, quote, and this is from ABC News, which I have the news footage and the article in the paper, and he said, quote, there is way too much stuff in there for two boys to have done this. My investigators are now opening this investigation to friends, associates, and, quote, others in the community. And that was his quote to ABC News that night. At 1 o'clock in the morning, for some strange reason, after he had gone home, the FBI, headed by Dwayne Fusler was the FBI agent in charge of the investigation there, decided to call John Stone at home and wake him up and have him come back down to the crime scene. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, they were still broadcasting this live on the news and made him change his story and say, we are limiting this to the two suspects and possibly a couple of their friends. When I heard that, because I'd stayed up all night watching the footage down there with my friend, she looked at me and she goes, this is not good. She goes, they're up to something. And she goes, why is the FBI involved? Well, within a couple of days of mulling around the school, then going over to Jefferson County, I found out that the FBI was in charge from the moment that the call was relayed to them through what's called a mass casualty emergency phone line. And, of course, the federal center is right up the street from Columbine. And the FBI agents actually beat Jeffco deputies to the scene, and they were in control. And that's one of the areas where most researchers fall down because they continuously blame John Stone. They blame the deputies. They say you were incompetent, you were stupid. No, when the FBI comes in, they throw everyone else out. Everyone else gets to be an observer, and that's it. I know how they work because I have a cousin who's an FBI agent. I asked him how it works, and he says when we come on scene, he says we take over. We boot everyone else out.
Okay, I've had to deal with the FBI as well. But now, how did the FBI get involved in this if it's not a federal case? It's a local. It should be a local crime. Yeah.
Right. And under the normal circumstances that we understand state law and the separation of powers between state and federal government, it should be. But through my other cousin who is a lawyer, I found that they have a federal law called the school safe zones. And in those zones, you cannot have a gun if you're a civilian, even if you're just living on your property next door to a schoolyard. And that it's a federal law, and they use that to get involved in these school shootings as investigators and first responders. They use that federal law.
Okay, interesting. But now this FBI director, Fasuli, is that how you pronounce it?
Fuchsler.
Fuchsler.
Yeah.
Now, he's the one that he had two sons that were also in the Trenchcoat Mafia, no?
Yep. And they made the video showing the school being blown up the school year before. Yeah.
Right. So this FBI agent who came in and took over the whole investigation had two sons that went to that school and not only were members of the Trenchcoat Mafia, but his two sons were directly involved in the smaller group that made the film of Dilling and Kleibold being hitmen shooting up the school.
Right. In fact, that was the name of the video, Hitmen. And basically what it was that a girl let me read the script of it, and it was, I mean, this thing, it basically goes the way that the shooting did, in that these guys were hired to kill these kids at a school who didn't pay their drug bill and stuff, and they would also have to take out the witnesses. And the script really does follow the way the shooting went down, and it's very bizarre. It's like a perfect template for what they were doing, what eventually happened on April 20th.
Right. But now, were those sons, were they in the school that day?
One of them had taken the day off, and the other one was down the street at Carl's Jr.'s eating. And he had actually skipped fourth period to go eat lunch instead of waiting because he actually had second hour lunch, which means he would have been there during the shooting. So he left fourth hour and went to lunch, and the other brother took the whole day off.
Wow. Okay, right. And that also fits into, now there were other stories too about shooters possibly being in a park across the street. Wasn't there stuff like that as well?
Yeah, that's the kid that I talked to. She said when she came out the front doors, and she is coming out with a couple of other kids, and the boy that was with her backed her statement up, and she said to the southeast, on the east side of the school, there's a park. Now, we're not talking Clements Park to the north of the school. We're talking the park to the southeast across Bowles Avenue. Somebody was shooting from that park towards the school, and these kids were watching the bullets go past them and embed in the bricks, so they turned around and ran back into the school. Also, a girl leaving the gym with her friends when they were told to leave by the teacher tried to go out the northwest doors, which is on the north side of the school, and encountered these men dressed in black with these long black guns. That's the way she described them. So her and her friends went back into the school. And then another girl and her brother tried to go out the west doors, where supposedly Harris and Kleibold were supposed to have been, but when they got out there, Harris and Kleibold were not there, but somebody fired at them from the roof of the school. And I was there after the shooting when they let people on the property, and you could see where the bullet holes were in the ground. I mean, they left little impressions in the ground where they were hitting, and I stuck a little stick in the ground and looked at where it angled up to, and it angled up to the gymnasium roof. So there was obviously somebody up there shooting something, BB gun, one of the 9mm that Harrison Kleibold had, or something along that range. It definitely was not a shotgun. It was definitely some type of rifle.
Well, why don't we start with that? My God, like we can go all over the place with this story.
Oh yeah.
And just rant back and forth. What about this? What about that? But because it's an amazing story. But now, let's just start from the beginning, okay? Because now the official police claim is that these two kids carried in how many bombs and 30-pound propane tanks did they claim that these two kids brought in?
They had a little over 30 pipe bombs that were about a foot long and probably weighed a half a pound to a pound apiece. The ATF agent I talked to said most of them weighed right around a half a pound to a pound. And there was about 30 of those, but they also had 25 of the Rhino 30-pound propane tanks. Now, according to John Stone, the former sheriff, and I talked to him, he said, well, they just put all the stuff in 2 duffel bags and rushed the doors while shooting. And I was like, hey, I've got a barbecue too, and I know how heavy those stupid things are. I've had to carry them to the car to take them back to the store when they're empty.
Right.
And you don't grab 25 of those things in a duffel bag. I don't think there's a duffel bag big enough to hold them, and just rush the doors. That's insane.
Okay, so now I had always assumed that perhaps do the cops claim, well, they made several trips back and forth, or they're claiming that they came in with 25 of these propane tanks all at once?
They had two different stories, and these two stories they stick by to this day. They will not pick one over the other. Jeffco won't.
Okay.
Some of the deputies still claim that they rushed the door with all the hardware. Other deputies say, no, we believe they pre-positioned them. But the entire school has surveillance footage, and when Jane Hammond, who is the director of the Jefferson County Schools, had their security people go through the footage the night before and that morning, there was nothing to show Harrison Kleibold or anyone else carrying something like that in. So, I mean, when the security people say, they have nothing, up to that point, up to lunchtime being brought in, then you have to believe that this stuff was probably brought in afterwards. And this is the point. I think as certain individuals were shooting, other people were bringing these in. And the reason why is if you have a map of the school, Harrison Kleibold started shooting at the top of the stairs above the cafeteria outside the library. But at the same time, witnesses in the cafeteria watched students who were not Harrison Kleibold carrying two duffel bags into the cafeteria at the same time shots were going on upstairs outside the building.
Right, and some students actually described in police reports students that they recognized who had graduated previously.
Yes.
Walking in with duffel bags.
Yes, both Joe Stair and Robert Perry, who were former students, were the two that walked into the cafeteria with the duffel bags. There's numerous students who have said that. There were some students who were didn't know him by name, but knew him by look. They never associated with him, and they said, well, this guy who's a certain height, and he wears a trench coat, and he's got this kind of pockmark on his face. Well, that was Joe Stair. And then they would say, well, there's this guy with a tie-dyed shirt, and he was real tall and heavy set, and he had pimples all over his face. Well, that was Robert Perry. They didn't know him by name, but they described him to a T, which matched the other statements from students who knew them by name and knew what they looked like and their features that were, would identify them personally.
Okay, so we have way more bombs than these two guys could have carried in.
Right.
Then we have eyewitnesses who were identifying people that they recognize.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but none of this gets followed up on. And then we have a situation where there's an FBI director that has two sons in the school or near the school and part of the same group. And did anybody, the two sons, did anybody identify them as being shooters or anything like that? No?
No, that was the thing. I went through the documents. I talked to a couple of the kids that were in the cafeteria because I thought if some of these other shooters would be anywhere, they'd be in the cafeteria since, like the library, that seemed to be a crux of the shooting. And nobody identifies the Fusler kids as being there. In fact, they all say they know the one kid called in sick that day, and the other one left early fourth hour before the first lunch started and went to lunch.
Okay, were there any other mysterious kids who didn't show up for school that day? Or...
Oh, yeah, over 100 kids. Over 100 kids did not show up that day, and that's just the ones that are willing to admit they showed up. I had one teacher admit to me that she left the attendance sheet in her classroom, and then when it was entered in evidence, a police detective's name was in her spot where she would sign it, and all these little plus boxes were signed off of students that she knew were not actually there, but that this detective had signed the sheet and put it in that these students were there.
Yeah, and how would he even know?
Because all of those kids who were supposed to be in her class, and that was a science class, that was in the classroom next to where Dave Sanders died, every one of the students that were in her class had parents that were law enforcement officers either in Jefferson County or Denver Police Department.
Okay, yeah, that's another thing I've heard as well. Okay, but now you mentioned Dave Sanders.
Yes.
Right? Now, because I was watching some of the documentaries about this, some of the mainstream documentaries, and the kid who was given first aid to Dave Sanders, he was of the opinion that, hey, this guy should have survived. Why wouldn't he survive?
because they left him in there. They admit that SWAT did in the notes that SWAT officers take. They claimed that it was too dangerous to remove him from the school, that they had a line of kids they had to get out of there, and if they had to bring a stretcher in and get him out, it would slow them down, and snipers would be able to pick him off and them and the students. That was their excuse in their notes in the SWAT documents.
Now, that's interesting, because now that day, before all this stuff came out, there was a lot of criticism because, hey, how come the cops didn't go in? How come the cops waited out like they were cowards, waiting out in front? They were afraid to go in, right? Now, what do you make of that? What do you think was really behind that?
Well, I proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt because, once again, I got the news footage and Dwayne Fusler's own written statement to the Governor's Review Commission where he told the cops to stay out. It was his order that local law enforcement was to maintain a perimeter, and they were not to return fire to the suspects even if the suspects shot at them, and they were not to pursue suspects into the school. That's in his written statement to the Governor's Review Commission. And on April 22nd, it was his public statement to CNN as well as local news.
Okay, so in your investigation, you went and you did like FOIA, right? The Freedom of Information Act requests, and you purchased a lot of reports and stuff. How much did you spend on this investigation you've done?
When I bought the documents and the news footage, I paid $400 for all of the news footage. And then when I got the documents originally through the FOIA, they wouldn't give me anything. They said, you'll have to wait until Jefferson County decides that their case is either closed or that they're solid enough that they can afford to release the documents. So I waited, and then I was given a heads up before they officially released the documents, and I went over there and got them, and I had to fill out a form, and it took like a week, which was great for FOIA, for state-level FOIA, because usually the state takes a lot longer than the feds. And I got the original documents, which were Eric Harris's diary, the 911 calls, the original ones, and I knew there was a ton of them missing, and they came on a CD, and I got the original 11,000 page documents, and I paid $900 for that.
Okay, so about $1,500 for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you you're really putting your time in here, right? Now. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, good. I commend that. Now, one of the things I remember when I was, because there used to be a bunch of websites.
Yes.
Up about this topic. And when I first did my research and I sat down and said, okay, let me research this and see what's going on. One of the stories I heard was that witnesses said that they saw the shooters had like headsets on where they could talk to each other through headsets. Did you catch that? Okay.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
What I got from that is, once again, this is provable. It's not conspiracy theory. Not only did the witnesses at Columbine describe this, but law enforcement officers that responded to the scene, who, by the way, have a much better ability to remember information correctly than the average witness on the street. They also, when they saw these suspects, because they kept appearing at the windows, there was one on the roof, they believed they even had one in Clements Park, through their scopes on their guns, they could see the headsets. And these police officers, when they wrote the reports, said these boys and whoever they were definitely had headsets. Well, later, I don't know if you remember Michael Corbett. Do you remember him?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, Michael Corbett was a radio talk show host on the internet, and he was also a stringer for BBC. He was a part-time guy. Well, he had gotten video footage of police both arriving and leaving the scene at Columbine, and he got footage of men who looked like SWAT officers coming out of the back of Columbine High School before the local police were even allowed anywhere near the school. And they got in a green minivan, and they drove by him, and they were dressed like this girl described to me, black BDUs, and they had headsets on, and they were carrying M16s.
Right. Now, one of the things I heard was that the guys with the headsets were looking for people who believed in God because they had to be talking to people outside and knew about the 911 call, what the caller was saying, oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God, and praying. They heard her praying or something like that. And they went... Okay, what do you know about that story?
That was the teacher, Patty Nielsen, And she was the first one to call 911. She had saw the shooters as they began shooting outside the school. And she called 911, and she was a devout Christian, and she began saying the Lord's Prayer, and, they were trying to get her to talk, tell me what the suspect looks like. Well, her real phone call has never been released to the public. And what I do know from listening to chatter from different police officers is that somebody was locked into the phone call system. Somebody was locked in, knew who was talking to 911. That's why they went in the library. They weren't looking for Christians in general. They were looking for a woman calling 911 who was describing the third and other suspects to the 911 dispatcher. And that's why they went around that library going, are you a Christian? Are you a Christian? And they only picked out girls that were Christians. There were boys that had crosses hanging around their neck that they never even touched in that library. They were looking for girls. And they weren't looking for girls. They were looking for a specific girl, Patty Nielsen, who told them about this adult that trained Harrison Kleibold, and I know who he is, and the cops know about him, the feds know about him, everybody knows about him, and they had to get her and shut her up because she could describe him, but there's a reason why they couldn't find her. She went in the back room and hid. And it's an area in the library that if you don't know that library, you don't know the room exists.
Okay, but then the shooters with the headsets had to have access to the calls, the 911 calls. So then those weren't trenchcoat mafia guys; they were cops. Then weren't? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're cops or federal agents. Both can hack into the phone system. It's easy to do. My cousin showed me how to do it. I can do it. I mean, if I have the right equipment, I can sit outside your house and hack into your phone. It's not it's not that difficult.
But my thing is that, there's different theories here. One is that, there was more kids involved, and that a lot of these kids grew up, because my understanding is that the years before, the Trenchcoat Mafia was a much bigger group, and also they were in other schools as well. You know what? Let's take a nice commercial break here now, okay?
Okay.
And then we'll get back, and I'll form my question for you the way I'm trying to get it out. We'll take a little break here. We'll come right back after this. We're here with William Zabel, who has more information about Columbine than I think we can do 10 shows with this guy that we're going to be able to get out of him. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, and then, you know what? I want to do a show with you, too, about Panama. We got to do a whole thing about, we got to do something about that as well. That's another story I'd love to get into. Because when you were talking about that, about the mass graves and Noriega and his drug dealing and Bush and all that kind of stuff. Let's do a show about that one day, too, as well. Okay. So we'll be right back after this. We're going to take a break, a message from our sponsors.
And everybody else that wanted to grammar check it, they just had this attitude against the conspiracy behind Columbine. One professor back east told me, he says, oh, I know it was just Harrison Kleibold, and you're crazy. I'm not going to grammar check this. And another one said, well, I think you should reorganize it so that you bring the drugs into it and the video games and all that. And
yeah.
When people kept trying to redirect me, I just said, you know what, that's it. I mean, I've taken enough English classes. I think I can get through it. I think I can do it myself without looking too bad in public. So, but my aunt was a school teacher. I mean, if she has some time, I can get her, to look at it. A documentary, I do have the elements for a documentary in the other room on my Mac. I have a big video editing workstation. I just, got to get it together. I don't know if you remember, I told you when we were off air, I said, I've been real busy and, with the economy the way it is and what my boss has me doing. He has me running, 2 businesses by myself while he's out of the country all the time running around the world. And, so I've got to go to the bank. I've got to collect the money. I've got to, make sure the security system's on. So I get home and I'm so tired and I'm like, do the Columbine documentary, do it. And I'm like, I'm too tired.
No, I hear you. I'm in the same situation here. Okay, so now, why don't we get into this? The Trenchcoat Mafia.
Okay.
Because when you watch these documentaries, and even that movie Elephant and all that kind of stuff like that, they give you the impression that Trenchcoat Mafia was about 12 kids. They were like, some they even said they were gay and they were being bullied by the other kids. What's the truth about the Trenchcoat Mafia?
The truth about the Trenchcoat Mafia, and I actually didn't find the real truth till I went to Germany. I went to visit my cousin while he was stationed over there at Ramstein. And we were off base, and we went to a club, and there was all these guys with trench coats, and I looked up and I made a joke about, wow, trench coats are even popular here. And he looked at me and he said, Bill, these guys, they're trench coat mafia too. I said, what? Everyone decided to take on the name? And he says, no, these guys are actually associated with the people in the United States. And I said, you're kidding. He says, oh, no. He says, it's very well known on military bases and even in the German government that they're connected. So I started asking around, and I found out from people who to talk to find out more about the trenchcoat mafia in Germany. And I ended up going all over the place. I don't know how many miles I put on that rent-a-car, but I went to Hamburg, Frankfurt, and everyone had the same tale. Oh, yeah, this is an international organization. You didn't know that? You're from Colorado. Oh, yeah, they're connected to the guys in Colorado. They were all talking to each other after the shooting was over and all that. And I thought, no, wait a minute, an international gang of high school kids, what's the logic behind that? Well, when I was talking to a student from Columbine and his dad, he says, well, you don't know the true history of this. And I said, no, I've only heard bits and pieces about it. He says, Bill, this group was created by the U.S. Marshal's Office. And I said, oh, come on. He said, no, it was. And he said, this is an organization that he says you will find is known to the public, but they're not really scandalous, at least up until Columbine. They're not known to deal drugs, they're not known to have guns or start gang fights, but they're just kind of out there in the cities of America. And I found out that quite a number of cities have trenchcoat mafia chapters. Denver has probably one of the biggest. There's over 300-400 in Denver. Los Angeles, Las Vegas, let's see what else. There was Chicago, New York, Detroit had them for a while, but, the black gangs were kind of, harping on them and giving them trouble, so they kind of dispersed up there. I found them in Miami and I found them in Dallas, and I just kept thinking to myself, how could a gang like this be all connected together, and yet the government says, oh, there's only 10 or 12 of them and they're not known outside of Columbine, when the victims and the witnesses at Columbine will tell you that. They'll tell you, oh, this isn't directly associated with us. They just have a chapter at Columbine, but they're all over the place. And that's what the kids at Columbine will tell you.
Yeah, but there was something, too, about the group in Columbine, the smaller group, like the 12, 15 kids, that they used to talk German.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were talking German. They had an association with a woman that worked at Lockheed Martin that maintained their websites. And she had a personal website called The Dark Castle. And she suspiciously had information about this school shooting on her website a good 24 hours before it happened. And her website was actually hosted on the Lockheed servers. And I have a friend that works at Lockheed, and he said Lockheed went nuts when they found out.
Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, that she had this on their servers. But yeah, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, they got access to her web pages and printed them, but they never released them to the public. But I had actually been on her site the day after the Columbine shooting, and clearly if you look at her pages and go in, where you can find out when the page was made and everything in the web browser, it was clearly the day before the shooting. And she says some very dark, very strange things about Columbine. She does it like a poem type thing about, how the kids deserve this, the parents deserve this, community deserve this, just bizarro things. And I just like, ew. And then, they grabbed her pages before I could print them because I was at school and I didn't have access to the printer. And I'm like, man, I got to get home and print these pages. By the time I got home, Jeffco had put up their own little banner and said this website's been seized.
Wow. Okay, I had never heard that before. That's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Now, yeah. But what about this business about the trenchcoat mafia were being bullied and Dylan and Kleibold were being bullied by the jocks?
Oh, please. The jocks were more scared of the trenchcoat mafia than,
right.
The trenchcoat mafia, these guys were all over 6 feet tall. There was only a couple of members that were like 5'9", 5'10". The rest of them were tall, and they were big. And that is pure bunk. That is designed to, they designed so much disinformation around Columbine. You made this whole mentality where, the trenchcoat mafia, they're victims like Harris and Kleibold. We must feel sorry for them. Please,
right.
These guys all had juvenile records. Every one of them did. Drug dealing, attempted rape, B&E. They all had criminal records on them. They weren't angels. They weren't nice people.
The guy kicked out of school for attempted rape.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher who kicked him out of school was who?
Dave Sanders.
The one that died.
Yep. And the kid that got kicked out of school was Robert Perry, and Dave Sanders caught him in the back of the gymnasium where they stored equipment trying to rape a girl. He actually was tearing at her clothes, this Robert Perry was. He called Jefferson County. He called the school security officer, got him thrown out of school. Robert Perry was actually on probation the day that he showed up on the property. He was actually at Columbine that day. Remember, he's the one that people saw bringing the duffel bag into the cafeteria with Joe Stair. But also, take a wild guess of where the SWAT team found him when they were rescuing students.
Where?
In the classroom where Dave Sanders died.
Get the hell out of here!
Right there in the SWAT team's notes. It's in their notes.
So here's a kid that was expelled from the school for rape, and yet he's there during the shooting. Was he arrested?
No, they let him walk off. They let him walk off.
What trespassing? You arrest him, hold him for trespassing. No?
No, not a thing.
Oh, my God.
And I checked with John Stone, and I also checked with Steve Davis, a public relations officer. I said, was he ever arrested? And they said, no, why should he be? And I said, well, excuse me, he got thrown out of school. He was at the very least trespassing on the property by being there. And then Steve Davis goes, well, I'll have to look it up and get back to you. And, of course, he never did. Stone said that he had no information on Robert Perry, which in a way makes sense because sheriffs don't do the day-to-day work of the cops. So he may not have even been informed. And in fact, I proved that later on, it was about 6 months later, I proved that the FBI was the choke point in the investigation, and very little was going up to the undersheriff or the sheriff. Very little.
Okay, but it just seems that if you're investigating a major crime like this, you want to arrest as many people as you can, even if they're victims, okay? Because you want to put a little pressure on these guys to talk about a wider. It's only. Oh my God, I'm in shock. I never knew that part at all. Yeah,
well, and what's even worse is they never followed police procedure that day because I have talked to cops in other states that have said that when they have a shooting, they don't let anybody leave the property. You stay there, and they interview everyone on the spot. No one gets to leave.
And did they put the little cones by every bullet casing and stuff like that as well?
No.
Yeah, none of that stuff, right?
No. If you go through the ballistics evidence, you will find, comparing that to the shell casings laying on the ground, and if you close in on the photos using Photoshop and the magnifying glass, you can count the shell casings, and they've got one number by one shell casing, and then about a foot away there's a whole bunch of shell casings, and there's no number near it at all.
Wow.
Yeah. And they admit that there was ballistics evidence that, quote, would not be tested. It's through the investigators' notes. I counted over 130 shell casings that they said they would not test in their own notes.
Wow. So we don't know how many guns were used.
Well, I know that there was at least 2 more guns than what they officially admit. There was a gun that fired a .223 round that was used, and there was a .45 caliber handgun that was used. They did find .45 caliber shells, and they found .223 shell casings on the roof of the school, even though they claimed there was no shooter up there.
Oh, wait a second. They found shells on the roof?
Yep, I got the photos of them. That was what was released in 2002 when they released the second volume of documents, and they tried to hide them in the investigative files, where they show the photos. Stone and his deputies, they were trying to create a media circus. They would show you photos of the sheriff's department, and then the next page would have a photo of a shell casing. Then they would show the sheriffs and all the deputies standing together in the next page, and then the page after that would be another photo of bullet casings. So I took all those out of the PDF file and put them by themselves, and most of those shell casings didn't even have numbers next to them. That's completely against procedure because I've talked to the experts. Like I said, I have relatives in my family in law enforcement and FBI, and they've all told me, they said, they're blowing procedure out the door here.
Now, what about, do you have evidence of casings that the guns were not found, of shell casings that were found, but no corresponding gun was located in the subsequent search.
Right. The 223s and the 45, they do not even list a gun, nor do they even try to say they were looking for one. They just list the shell casings, but they never match it to a gun. Now, the thing is down there at Columbine, the only long guns that responding police officers had at that time in that area, and that's District 5 of the Denver Police Department as well as Jefferson County, all they had was riot 12-gauge shotguns. They did not have M16s. Only the SWAT team had that. Now, the SWAT teams were firing 7.62 rounds when they got there, and they thought that they were shooting at suspects. Those are accounted for and matched to the SWAT officers' guns, but these 45 shell casings and the shell casings on the roof, the 223s, not only are they not matched to a gun, but they never even tried. They never even mention them. They just show the shell casings and where they were found, but they don't even have an evidence number next to them.
This is amazing. There's so much evidence.
Yeah, and this is just the screw-ups that we know about. I've been told by one cop in Jefferson County, she says, you have no idea how much evidence that they just simply destroyed. And I said, excuse me? And she goes, yeah, there's stuff that they just destroyed. They didn't even want the investigators to look at it. And I said, who did that? And she goes, the FBI. She goes, the FBI and the ATF were both on the scene that night, and they were picking up shell casings with their bare hands.
Because they recognized them.
Yeah, there were local police officers. There were police officers from Littleton, Lakewood, Arvada, and Jefferson County Sheriff's deputies that saw these ATF agents picking up the shell casings, and it's in their statements that was included in the document release.
Oh, boy. Okay, now what about, but everything was pinned on Dylan and Kleibold.
Harris and Kleibold, yeah.
Okay, right. Dylan Kleibold and Eric Harris.
Yes.
Okay, Harris and Kleibold.
Right.
So these two guys had an interesting career themselves. Now, I know they had some arrests, but did they have good lawyers even before this case came out? Did they have good lawyers that were getting them out of these robberies and stuff?
They must have, because Kleibold's lawyer was actually the family lawyer for Kleibold's mother, and she was the heir to her father's construction business in New Jersey, which was netting about $2 billion a year. And the lawyer from that firm is the one that represented them in the lawsuits. And he admitted that when they got busted for the break-ins and stuff, that he came in and made the deals with the DA. So he's a high-priced lawyer. And now the Harrises, the lawyer they had, was also a high-priced Denver attorney. He only took major murder raps and stuff. Why, before Columbine, he was helping the Harrises get their son off of, death threats and breaking into vehicles, I'll never know, because I've been down to his office. I mean, I looked at his pamphlets. He only does high-profile cases of murder and stuff. He doesn't do DUIs and juvenile arrests and stuff like that. So, yeah, there was some weird stuff going on with high-priced attorneys there.
Well, describe their criminal background and their complaints. I know there was restraining orders attempted. They even had a search warrant to go and search this kid's house that went nowhere. So describe all of that.
Okay, the first trouble that Eric Harris had, he was actually in junior high school, and he had threatened a girl who would not go out with him, and that was one of the first restraining orders there that got him busted. The second one was a freshman year at Columbine High School. He got caught stealing some equipment with Dylan Kleibold, and that was done out of court. The DA actually did that in his office, made the deal there. They dropped the charges if they would take the equipment back and write some letter to the school apologizing and all that.
Do we know what kind of well, they had to write a letter, but do we know what kind of equipment they stole?
Yeah, they were stealing video equipment. They were stealing beta decks. They had stolen some video capture cards for computers, that type of stuff.
Okay.
And then the next incident involved both Harris and Kleibold together. They were setting off bombs in a neighborhood about 2 miles west of Jefferson County, across the county from Columbine High School. They were like 2 or 3 miles west of the school in kind of an open area. And they were setting off bombs, and at first they didn't get caught, but one night they hung around afterwards, and somebody had called the cops, and they got busted, and they admitted that they were, they tried to claim at first they were just blowing off CO2 cartridges, But the fact is, whatever they were using was causing people's lights to go out. So they figured they were doing the pipe bomb and things then. They got ticketed for having unlicensed explosives was the deal there. And believe it or not, the cop let them go home. He just ticketed them for, just doing homemade blowing up stuff. And I talked to a couple of lawyers in Denver, and they said, no, those guys should have been arrested. And I said, well, look at the documents. He just let them go with a ticket. Well, they went to court, and that was done out of court, too. It was done in the DA's office. And once again, they paid some kind of fine to the county, and that's when the deal with the anger issues, started, and they thought that both of them should go to counseling, which they did. And then they got the counseling over with, and they were kind of behaving a little bit. They were kind of making threats to people, but they were doing it in such a way over the internet that people couldn't really prove it was them. But it was at this point that Neil Gardner, Jefferson County Sheriff's deputy, was assigned to watch both of them. And this was in 98, the previous school year, beginning in January 98. He began watching them. And most of this has been scrubbed from the official record. It was only his admission to Dateline NBC that he had been following them since 98 that anybody even knew he had been watching them that long. But he said that he believed that they were the ones making multiple threats, after this blowing up stuff over in a field. Certain students were getting threatened, and threats were coming into the school, things like that. One thing that Neil Gardner did find when he pulled Eric Harris's record was that he found out clear back in junior high he was threatening to blow up Columbine High School. And nothing was ever done about it. The school district never notified the sheriff's department, never notified his parents, nothing. Nothing was ever done. It was just he was talked to in the principal's office and then allowed to go. And then, of course, as Neil Gardner progressed, we came up to the van arrest. And that was in 98. And I can tell you one thing right there. If people think that, oh, well, maybe they just got slapped around a little by the cops, they deserved it, blah, blah, blah. Oh, no, people, this was much more evil than that. I know one witness who I talked to personally who saw it. I don't even know if she's still alive, but she definitely saw what was going on, and it sickened her, and it scared her pretty bad, too.
And the allegation is, or the rumor is that they were raped by the cops.
Yes.
Okay. And you've talked to people who have say they were eyewitnesses to that.
One of them was an eyewitness. The other ones are the families that actually heard it from sheriff's deputies who were on the scene. There was 4 deputies, and they believe maybe a 5th one, though they've never been able to identify him. He seemed to be parked off a ways from where this was going on. And these Columbine families heard this from these deputies that were there that said that this particular deputy, who's a brutal guy, I've actually run into him myself, and that he sodomized both boys.
Yeah, isn't it a shame, because, I do cases here locally, too, and, you deal with certain cops and stuff, and you don't even want to say their name, because you dealt with them personally,
Yeah.
This is what we live in nowadays.
Yeah.
But now, wasn't there something, too, about one of the boys was saying, too, that they thought that they were being drugged or hypnotized or something like that as a child?
Yes, Eric Harris had told kids when he still lived at Plattsburgh Air Force Base. I had actually gone back there, and it was hard to find people that remembered him, but I finally did run into a kid that was in high school that remembered him from elementary school, and, their parents were all Air Force officers, so they lived on base. And he said, Harris just kept that up all the time, kept saying that, somebody's talking to him in his mind, somebody's doing something to him. And I said, well, what did you think? Was he being abused by a teacher or somebody in the community? And he goes, no, not that. He says he mentioned drugs, and he mentioned that he felt like he was not in control of his own thoughts. And I said, well, was he seeing a shrink or anything? And he goes, I don't know. But he says that's all Harris mentioned was that. And he says, kids thought he was just a little bit, out to lunch, because of what he was talking about.
Now, is that the one that during the shooting was more talkative, or the one that was silent during the shooting?
Oh, that's talkative. Yeah, Eric Harris. I mean,
okay.
He basically among the two, he was Mr. Mouth. Dylan Kleibold was very quiet. I talked to a number of kids who knew Dylan Kleibold better than they ever knew Harris, and Kleibold was very quiet compared to Harris.
Okay, and I know we're jumping around a lot here. Okay, and I apologize. It's okay. But now, what about after the shooting? The police went to their homes, and they said that when they pulled up, they could smell gasoline before they even went into the home.
Oh yeah, there was mason jars full of gasoline and little ball bearings and stuff, and they had wicks in these top of these jars, and they were all over the garage. And then when they entered the house, they could even smell it worse in the house. And they found the fire department ushered all the cops out when they determined that there were no weapons or anything. So they ushered them out, and they sent in a fire department team that deals with bombs and stuff. And they said that the entire house had these little jars placed everywhere around the house. I mean, Harris or whoever motivated him or whoever was operating him intended for them to blow up their own homes.
Oh,
At
really?
least the Harris home, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, wait, I didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
listen, okay. Whoa, I didn't know that at all. Now, you're saying, by the way, that these little gasoline bombs were all over the house. Now, what I understand is the cops show up, the garage door is open, and the mother and father are in there, and the sister is in there as well, and aunt was in there.
Actually, they were sitting in the car in the driveway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were sitting in the car in the driveway. They weren't in the house. And when the cops drive up, the brother is sitting in the back seat, Kevin, the older Harris brother. He gets out of the car with a duffel bag, kind of like, that businessmen carry. And
Yeah.
he walks over to the first responding officer, sets the duffel bag down, walks back to the car, but doesn't get back inside, but stands there. And it was a few minutes later that Harris's mom actually got out of the car and walked in. Now, as they're responding, why they would go ahead and let her walk into the house, I do not know. But they did, and Wayne Harris remained silent. Even after they asked him, are you Wayne Harris? He wouldn't say anything. He refused to speak. But Kevin did speak. He told him everything. Now, I don't know about the sister, whether she was there or not. The police officer's notes don't mention the sister. I think the sister was in, I think she went to see you, and she was watching this on the news from her dorm, if I remember right.
Okay. Amazing.
Yeah, because the only thing I remember from the notes and talking from one of the West Metro firefighters that was there was it was the older brother, the mother and the father, and then they had contacted the sister later, and she was watching it from her dorm up at CU in Boulder.
I didn't even know there was an older brother, okay? I didn't even know that. Yeah, I didn't know that. But you're saying that, then I always thought, too, that the gasoline bombs and stuff like that and the pipes and stuff was in the kid's room, but this is all throughout the house.
Yeah, it's everywhere. That's why they ushered the cops back out. West Metro Fire did, because anything, if those wicks had touched anything, they were the type that you could brush them against something and it caused a spark. It would light them. And so the fire department wanted the cops out of there. And then finally, when they were able to, I can't remember the term they used. Oh, render safe. When they were able to render safe these gas bombs, they took them out in fireproof totes. And when they did that, then they allowed the cops to go in. And when they got in there, I mean, it was Harris's room. There were more guns in his bedroom. And that's what gets me, is why they only show the 4 weapons at the sheriff's department, but there were more guns in his bedroom. There was another 12 gauge. There was a handgun. And I believe there was another weapon like the High Point 9mm. It was a little bit different than a High Point, but that's what they found in his bedroom. And yet none of those guns are shown in the main evidence log. They're only shown in the officer's notes. But when you go to the ballistics evidence and go to the section on guns found, they're not listed in there. They're only listed in the officer's notes from the scene. Okay.
This is just unbelievable. Okay. Okay, we're going to have to take a break. And I get so caught up in what you're saying. We missed the break by 8 minutes.
Oh.
Okay. But we got a 5-minute commercial break coming up. So we got a nice little break. Get up and get a drink. Do what you want to do? And come back, have a smoke, if you want to. And we'll be right back after this with William Zabel. who is an encyclopedia of Columbine information. I apologize because I'm taking them. It's going to be a 4-minute break. I'm kind of bouncing them back and forth, in out of chronological order, which sometimes you do when you question somebody. You want to kind of bounce them around. You want to catch them catch them up. But here I'm interviewing a guest that I agree with, and I'm bouncing him all over the place because it's just such fascinating information, and it's just hard to really get this story out. We'll be right back after this break from our sponsors. We got William Zabel. We're talking about Columbine, Harris and Kleibold, these shooters down there, and all their friends, and all these guys were involved as well. Police corruption, all kinds of stuff with forget it, sloppy police work or cover-up, looks like to me. And we'll be right back after this break with more of this. If you're looking for essential oils, stop by and check out Essentially Tammy on Facebook. She is Young Living Essential Oils Independent Distributor. These 100% therapeutic grade oils help support the body's natural functions. You can click on her website posted on Essentially Tammy, that's T-A-M-I, to see the current deals and check out the benefits of oils such as frankincense, joy, valor, lemon, thieves, panaway, and many more. Email Jocotami, that's Jocatami, at yahoo.com, or call 352-239-8546. That's 352-239-8546. Hey, don't forget good old Amanda at Pacific West Bamboo. Pacific West Bamboo, 503-839-8126. You can reach her at demroots@oppermail.com. Pacific West Bamboo, your number one source for timber, construction, and craft-grade bamboo poles, plants, products, and more. They specialize in eco-friendly reclaimed wood products for the home and garden. They're located in Portland, Oregon, servicing the Northwest for over 10 years. They can be reached at 503-839-8126. That's 503-839-8126. Her Facebook page is Pacific West Bamboo. They can and do ship nationwide, and they're currently getting a new line of bamboo flooring, veneers, and laminates made from Guadawa bamboo, one of the world's strongest bamboos, grown and produced and manufactured in Central America using only economically and environmentally friendly practices and standards. Good old Mike Ray at infinityhomeplans.com. Check out Infinity Home Plans and Design Services, your resource for 3D and 2D draftsman services. They offer a multitude of products, including stock home plans, 2D digital drawings, 3D models, renderings, and more. That's infinityhomeplans.com. Hey, don't forget emailrevealer.com. That's my website, emailrevealer.com. And we offer all different kinds of services. Current place of employment locate. Let's say you're trying to locate where your ex-husband or your ex-wife is working so you can collect on child support. You contact us, we can locate their place of employment for you and help you collect on that child support. Let's say you think that your husband or your wife is cheating on you. Give us their email address and we can trace it back to online dating websites and dating services. So we have a multitude of services on emailrevealer.com. Hey, don't forget the New World Mexican Women. Okay, now you just Google New World Mexican Women. You can find their book where they first describe their love letters to their men and their sons and their uncles and their brothers who have traveled from South America to North America to work as migrant workers. But the women down in this town there in Guerrero, Mexico, they want their men to come back. So they've written these beautiful love letters, and they've put them all in this beautiful coffee table book. First, the letters are written in Spanish, handwritten. You can see pictures of the people writing the books. And then it comes on after that, and it's typewritten in English. And then also, too, the second half of the book is teaching you how to make authentic Mexican jewelry from these New World Mexican women. You can find their book on Lulu.com. It's only $19, or you can download the digital edition for free. That's New World Mexican Women, and it's a two-part book where first part is the love letters, and the second part is the making the handmade jewelry, the authentic Mexican jewelry. But you can also contact them too as well if you want to get a deal on wholesale jewelry from Mexico from these women.
You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York.
Oh, boy. Okay. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I am your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Don't forget the show is brought to you by Audible.com. Audibletrial.com. I think somebody has a mic unmuted, Patty or CJ? There you go. Okay, audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. You go there, what do you get? You get a free audio book. And we're also being sponsored, upcoming soon, with a little pre-sponsored sponsorship of Truth Funders, truthfunders.com. And go to their Facebook page tonight and go to Truth Funders and give them a little like over there and a little love and tell them the Opperman Report sent you. So we can get them to finance our operations over here. Okay, we got with us tonight William Zabel. Mr. Encyclopedia of Columbine, you know. Oh my God! I wanted to touch upon a few more things. Don't let me forget about blackjack pizza, okay? But a couple of things because I'm getting hungry. But a couple of things too is with Harris and Kleibold is this business about how the cops the cops wrote a search warrant for the house.
Right.
Before all this.
Yes. That search warrant was written by the, I'm trying to remember his name now. He's another guy that served in naval intelligence with Stone and this other guy, and I can't remember his name now. Oh, Kleibold, Lieutenant Kleibold. He wrote the search warrant himself and handed it off to two deputies, and at some point before it was actually served, somebody higher up between Kleibold and the sheriff, and there's a group of people in there. You have the FBI, which, by the way, they have an office in the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, but right above Kleibold and below the sheriff, there are lead investigators that handle all of the major crimes, and then you have the FBI dispersed in there. Somebody within that group stopped the actual warrants. Now, the common wisdom is because Kleibold actually served in the military with all these guys, that it was possible that Kleibold did it himself, but why would he issue a search warrant and then retract it? But that is the conventional wisdom. Now, people in the Columbine area will tell you that Wayne Harris was personal friends with Kleibold, but the problem is that Wayne Harris was Air Force and Kleibold was naval intelligence. Their chances of ever crossing paths before moving to the Littleton area were remote at best. So yeah. I think it's somewhere in that FBI upper investigators area where that warrant got quashed. Now, according to the families that lived on either side of the Harrises who knew what Eric Harris was doing, they said had they gone in there at that time, that this would have never happened because he had everything in the garage, everything in his bedroom. He had notes in a notebook that later disappeared before the shooting actually happened. So, yeah, that portion of that warrant was actually the deal. Now, there was another guy involved in the warrant, and he was an investigator, but his job wasn't major crimes. It was like juvenile stuff like bomb making and graffiti. He actually typed the warrant and then asked Kleibold if he wanted to add anything. And at that point, Kleibold says, well, I've got to rewrite the warrant. And I believe his name was Martinez or Gutierrez or something like that. And he did not really want the warrant rewritten, but it was by Kleibold. And then he got this guy to sign off and say, yeah, we can live with that. Let's run with it. It's believed that Kleibold may have taken stuff out of the warrant for discovery. I know in the original warrant that this lower-level guy wrote, he wanted all the computers in the Harris home, not just the Harris computer. In the later warrant, it was just the Harris computer, not any of the others. And that has always made people wonder, was there something on the other computers? Was Harris doing something on his dad's computer, his mom's computer, his brothers, his sisters, whatever? Or were there other family members involved? And maybe they were involved to a more extent. I can tell you with Wayne Harris's background in Air Force intelligence, I get very worried every time, that I come across one of these shootings, and the parents of these shooters, at least one of them has always got a background in military intelligence, and I just can't get past that. That's got to be more than coincidence.
Yeah, I hear you with that. Oh no, okay, that's something to get into right now, okay? Because now a lot of these kids who were either shot up or were in Columbine, the victims you might call them, later on went on to adventurous lives themselves, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Well, you had a number of kids that went obviously into military intelligence. They had a boy and girl who were dating at Columbine High School during the shooting. They graduated, they got married, and they suddenly end up in Iran in 2004, and they get arrested for taking pictures of a nuclear site. And they were both Columbine students. There's an article about how they were talking about they were at Columbine that day and all this. And you got to ask yourself, how do two civilians get out in the middle of the desert in northern Iran? Then you look at their family backgrounds, and both the boy and girl had fathers that were in the CIA. And you had kids that went on to, they went into defense contracting work. There was one kid, I'm trying to remember his name. He works out in California, and he works for a subdivision of Ball Aerospace that makes spy satellites. And he had a very controversial background out there. While he was working out there in 2007, somebody had taken a pot shot at him, and when they started doing a lot of background on him, they found out that he was talking to a lot of foreigners that were living around that area where this plant was, and some of them were Iranians, some of them were North Koreans. And, you begin looking at these kids after they graduate from high school and where they end up going, and it's like, okay, come on here. These guys end up you got a boy and girl ends up in northern Iran after they graduate from Columbine. They're accused of being spies. They're taking pictures of a nuclear site. You got another guy who's talking to foreigners, and he works for a subdivision that makes spy satellites. And so they're looking into him to see if he's a spy for either the Iranians or North Koreans. Then you've got another girl and boy, a girlfriend and boyfriend, who go to Virginia Tech and are working in a classified division of their computer science area. And guess when they were there?
Yeah. The Virginia Tech shooting.
Yeah, the Virginia Tech shooting. And if the girl had not left her keys for her locker in her lab in the dorm, they would have been right in the middle of it. Now, what they don't tell you about, and do we want to go in Virginia Tech or just stop with those two kids going there and then go back somewhere else? Because
I want to ask you one more question about Virginia Tech, and we'll have you back. We can talk. Listen, you can come back whenever you want.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I really like your stuff. But now, Virginia Tech, is it true that Judy Wood, who wrote that book of Where Did the Towers Go, that some of her students were at Virginia Tech and that they were possibly targets? I can't confirm. I cannot confirm they were targets, but they were definitely there. I mean, they definitely attended the school. I just find it strange that
we have these further school shootings, and people that were at a school shooting before end up at another school down the road, and I'm wondering, is somebody doing a cleanup operation here?
Right, right.
Because the boy and the girl that were at Virginia Tech, he saw 3 shooters. They all had face masks, and when he told the police this, he said, quote, "They look like cops," and that was this Kenneth kid. The girl, her statement, she only made a statement to the FBI after the Columbine shooting, and it's never been released, and I can't get it.
Oh, boy. Okay, that's amazing. Oh, no, why can't you get it, though?
FBI cites national security reasons. They say anything that wasn't released through Jefferson County through their public document release is considered classified national security.
Okay. There's a ton of stuff I want to talk to you about. And we've done 2 hours. A half hour got lost in the air. But, we did about 2 hours. Can you stay? We normally do an after show and we keep going on. You want to hang out? Take some calls?
I've got nothing else to do. Yeah.
Okay, great. I knew you would, man. Okay. I knew it, man. Okay. Because you're the kind of guy who can just talk forever, man. I love it.
Yeah, unless I hear a drone, and then things get a little bit shaky from there.
We'll dive under our desk and go from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about, we were talking about blackjack pizza, man. That's just fascinating. Tell us the whole story about blackjack pizza.
Oh, the whole thing, not only did Harrison Kleibold work there, but almost all of the Trenchcoat Mafia members filtered through there and had jobs there. Now, you got to remember that these are minimum wage jobs, and you get a little bit more money for driving pizza, but you're still not going to be living, in Cherry Creek in a $50,000 a month condo, But these guys were all working there at one time or another. They were building explosives outside the back of the store. They were outside back. And one woman came in to get a pizza. She was, a witness to what they were doing. And she says you could smell the gunpowder and stuff out back. And she says they came in and said, "We're busy. You'll have to come back later and get a pizza." And but they were definitely building stuff there, and they were making plans there. They had one of those eraser boards in the back, one of those white ones you use markers on. And several witnesses described that they had to the FBI and local police that they had a sketch of Columbine High School and where they were going to put stuff and where the bombs would be and all that. That was in the back of the store. Now, you're going to love this. This was not a corporate store. This was a private franchise. The guy who owned the store, his name was Brian Kurgis, but that was not his real name. He was actually a Muslim from Iran. Now you're going to love this.
Go ahead.
He was wanted in Iran for trying to blow up police stations with pipe bombs.
And wait, and we can't leave this out either, because part of the big plan that was in the boy's diary, was that they wanted to hijack a plane and then fly it into buildings in New York City as well.
Yeah, they mentioned the trade towers. They actually said the trade towers. They wanted to fly the planes into the trade towers. And, of course, that happened a couple of years later.
Well, yeah, that always happens, and I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
And wait, if they would have got caught, they would have had to write a letter and apologize.
That'd be about it, because these kids up until the van arrest never did time, and even then they just spent a couple hours in jail, and then their parents got them out. But for all these threats and bomb makings, all they did was pay a fine and write a letter of apology to the school district and crazy stuff like that, but they never did time for any of this stuff.
And people actually reported finding bullets, casings, and bomb-making equipment and fireworks and stuff like that at the Blackjack pizza place.
Oh,
on
yeah.
The roof. I think it was on the roof, right?
Well, that's where they were lighting their stuff off. They would manufacture it on the ground by the back door on a table, and then there was one of those utility ladders that goes up to the roof, because I went back there and looked. And they get up on the roof, and there's all these black marks where they were blowing up fireworks and everything, and they were shooting a gun off. Jefferson County did get called to Blackjacks one night. They were shooting a gun off, but by the time the sheriff's department got there, the gun was gone, and they all denied it.
And all these other videos, you see them when they're practicing with their bombs and their guns and stuff like that, and and even he hurt himself with his sawed-off shotgun, which is very common. Yeah, right. That's really common to happen. Now, all of that stuff, there were a lot of people around laughing in the background. It wasn't just these two guys.
Nope. I'm going to give you the juice that the parents are hiding from everyone.
Okay.
The people that were associated with the Trenchcoat Mafia and with Harrison and Kleibold specifically were the kids they killed.
Okay, repeat that.
The kids that they killed at Columbine were in the background of that video watching them. Cassie Burnell, Rachel Scott, John Tomlin, and all these other kids were actually all friends of Harrison Kleibold's. That's where the sheriff's department lied when they said Harrison Kleibold did not know any of these kids. They did. They knew every one of them. Rachel Scott dated Kleibold for like 6 months in their junior year. And yet they try to say that they never knew any of these kids they killed, so there was no motive. Well, of course there's motive. Here these punks are shooting off guns saying, hey, let's go blow up our school and kill a bunch of people. And you got all these kids in the background sitting in chairs, drinking beer, watching all this going on. You know, pretty soon you wake up and go, hey, we got some witnesses we got to get rid of.
So you think that their friends, they shot and killed their own friends? You think maybe the cops went in and killed their friends and the other witnesses? Or maybe they were involved too and the cops shot them? Do we know?
Here's what I have been able to determine. If Harrison Kleibold were involved in the shooting at all, they had a very minor role. I believe that these Trenchcoat Mafia members were actually doing most of the shooting, and I also believe that there were some adults there, both on-duty and off-duty cops shooting. Now, here's what I found out when I talked to an FBI agent in New York in May of that year. Her husband was getting his hair cut at a barber shop, and she came in after shopping to pick him up. And she claims, and it's in her 302 statement, and I got it from her FBI office, and she claims that in May of that year, Harrison Kleibold were sitting in that New York barber shop. And she knows it was them because she saw the bolos that the FBI put up about these. Now, this is what's strange. She claims that even after they announced Harrison Kleibold were dead in the library, there was still an FBI bolo out on those two.
Wait a second. You're saying that she saw them after they were killed in the library?
Yep. And she filed a 302 statement with her supervisor in New York City, and I got it.
Really?
Yep.
Well, then, okay, you know what? We're going to take another break, and then we'll get to the after show. We'll take some calls. But I really want to hear what you really think went on. Before we start taking calls, what is your theory of what is really going on here in this whole thing? Like I can live with the idea that there were 10 or 20 kids involved, you know, and maybe some of those kids had fathers that were the cops and stuff like that. It was kind of covered up that way. But then again, when you start looking at this other stuff that we know about this stuff with the guys with the headpieces, the earpieces, you know, and the microphones, and they had access to the 911 calls, that's a whole nother level, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, let's look at it this way. It is hard for people to accept the higher level conspiracy of a government assassination team, but let's look at it this way. The government, through the military and law enforcement, kill people every day, some of them that turn out to be innocent, that are not even criminals. And law enforcement officers are never prosecuted for that. Military officers, like in Fallujah, places like that, are never prosecuted for war crimes. And these people actually justify their murder of women and children in foreign countries. They justified it at Waco by saying we had to kill the children to save them. Remember Janet Reno saying that?
Yeah.
Anybody that does not have a problem with killing a non-combatant like a woman or child, I believe that they're more incapable of walking into an American high school for some political or military agenda and opening fire. I'm absolutely convinced they're capable of it.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you. Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back with William Zabel, who is a fascinating guest, and we can have him back on a bunch of topics, too. But we're dropping a couple of stations. We're dropping Hazy, so I want to say thank you to Hazy for helping us out and being with us up until now. We're still on, I believe, with all the Wolf Spirit guys and all the Awake stations are staying on with us. And CJ Mars, of course, stays with us always. And we're going to start taking calls. If you want to call in, 702-605-4894. Or you can Skype me at ed. Oh, you know what? I may not be able to take those calls because I'm not running the call here. We'll figure it out. We're going to take a break now. We'll come back after this with more William Zabel on the Opperman Report after show, right after these messages.